Welcome to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere with your host, Chris Parker.
And we are back with Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere. This is Chris Parker, and I am with Joe Pine. And Joe Pine, we're going to discover, has impacted, at least in the business world, probably some very significant things that you take for granted or know as true. And it all started, at least as far as I can tell, back in 1998. And we'll get to that 1998 moments in the conversation. But Joe, thank you so much for being here. Can you please, and I'm really curious how you answer this question. Can you please explain to people, Joe, what do you do and why do you do it?
First of all, Chris, it's a pleasure to be with you. I don't know if you know this, but it's almost exactly 10 years since we met in the Netherlands. And so I basically help companies figure out how they can create greater economic value for their customers. Greater economic value for their company, so that would be through creating greater value for their customers. Now, I always say my purpose in business is to develop frameworks to first describe what's happening in the world of business, and then prescribe what companies can do about it. And I did that first with mass customization, long before the experience economy, then with the experience economy, and also with books on authenticity and how to fuse the real and the virtual, a book called Infinite Possibility that I know you know very well. Mm-hmm. And then with other ideas bubbling up, that's all part of, the Marvel talks about its cinematic universe. So now I'm talking about, my thought universe, or all these different parts of it that come together in collaboration with other people. And so it's an exciting time right now.
And why, for you as a human, do you spend time on these things? These I guess, deconstructing and prescribing. What motivates you?
Well, it's fun, number one, to figure things out. It's intellectually stimulating. And particularly I was telling somebody this the other day, that I've actually have an applied mathematics degree. And the only thing I really kept from that is pattern recognition and model making. Right. And it's not something I can't actually turn it off, even if I wanted to at this point. Maybe I could have, 25, 30 years ago, but I can't turn it off anymore. Is that I just, my mind just seeks out patterns in what I'm doing, including patterns that are a data point of one. I don't need like two to make a pattern. I can see something that is just so unique and different. And then where you can see how that would then apply in many other situations. Say, okay, that's something significant, even though there's only one data point really for that. And then my mind works in frameworks. I was work with colleagues at a company called Stone Mantle, consumer insights consultancy, and we were working a number of years ago with a broadcast company, right? So this is a TV broadcaster. Even though we talked about the fact that it's splitting up and broadcasting as a dying model. They sort of recognize, we know that, but that's our job here, right? Somebody else is going to go, hopefully, create innovation and do all this other stuff. But our job is to do as well as we can with what we have. And we had this board up there, and he had all these different cells, basically, and this matrix up there. And I'm just sort of sitting in the back, going like this, just sort of watching what's going on. And finally, my colleague Dave Norton, he says, and I'm sure Joe's already developed a framework to make sense of all this. And I went, I'm on. I got to think, right? And within 5 minutes, I had a 2x2 framework that really did make sense of all that was going on. And later in that session, actually developed another one that's one of the ideas that's percolating and working on that I love. And it just comes naturally. And of course, there's a reason of, this is how I make money. Mm-hmm. This is what I do for a living. Everything I do is basically frameworks based. And the frameworks help. My goal is to make it so obvious, with the framework and how I develop and present it, that you can't help but say, I see that, right? That's the goal, is get people to see what's going on. I always say I'm not a futurist. I don't tell you what's going to happen. I'm telling you what's happening now, but you don't yet see it. And now once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then you can use that new insight to be able to make a difference in your business.
And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And as you know, I'm in the film industry as part of my life, and
amongst many other things.
And now that I have a working understanding of how film is made, I really can't unsee that. So it actually takes a really good film to get me into it, and because some of these things you can't unsee. So right. I'm curious.
I have the same disease. I can't experience something right without analyzing it. Right, and you're the same way now. A film has to be really good, is what I've gathered, in order to draw you in enough that you forget about the analysis of what's going on and how they're doing things, and you're just immersed in it.
And also, learning these principles and frameworks that you've shared, like the progression of economic value and based on the experience economy thinking, it also helped me cope and survive in the Netherlands as an American, a service-oriented American. Having in my youth worked at Nordstrom, known for its customer service, and Apple and university also not that being able to deconstruct the customer experience or the experience that I was going through, and then be able to understand sort of some of the whys and hows behind how they were solving the problems was actually pretty therapeutic for me, because I used to rage as a typical American abroad, like, oh, the service here sucks. And actually it gave me a framework just to appreciate that, no, it's different. I think that might be a good chance to talk about trees planted in rows, which we've already spoken about before. And I believe that came up in the Authenticity book.
Yes.
Can you tell that story a little bit as far as how...
I don't tell those often, so see if I remember all the details. But when the book first came out in 1999, right, The Experience Economy, the first edition, we're now on the third edition this year, re-release of it. But the first edition came out is I became a visiting professor at the University of Amsterdam and started traveling over there a lot. And I've told people I'm much more famous in the Netherlands than I am in the U.S. And when I talk on the Experience Economy, there is always one question that would come up, and from my Dutch audiences, and it was really less a question than an accusation. It always began with these two words, right? You Americans.
Yeah.
It'd say, you Americans, you like your Disneyland, your fantasy, your inauthentic experience. We Dutch, we like our authentic, our natural, our real experiences. This huge difference, right? And it sort of took me aback a little bit, but it really was one of the genesises, if that's you use that term, one of the book Authenticity, is being faced with having to answer this question and so forth. And so I eventually did develop a practice response to it, and talked about the fact that first of all, experiences happen inside of us, right? It's our reaction to the events that are staged in front of us. So in at least one sense, we cannot have an inauthentic experience, because it's who we are, right? It's just necessarily the experiences are part and parcel of who we are. So as long as we are real, then the experiences we have are real, and there may be some people you're not sure about, and so forth. Now, the stimuli for that experience may be more or less natural, more or less artificial, more or less authentic, more or less inauthentic, and that's really what you're talking about, is the stimuli of it. And then I say, it's a particularly interesting question from a country like the Netherlands, which is every bit as manufactured as Disneyland is, right? That there's nary a square meter of ground in the whole country that hasn't been reclaimed from the sea, or otherwise moved, modified, and manicured to look as if it had always been there. Mm-hmm. And that's where the kicker is. As I say, it's the only place I've ever been in the world where I go for a walk in the woods and all the trees are lined up in rows.
Yeah, and they are literally in rows in some places, and when you're driving by in the freeway and you see this, you're like,
right, exactly.
This is not natural.
That is not natural. All right, but what it does is it speaks to the desire for authenticity. You can speak about the desire to be not like Americans too, but it's the desire of authenticity that, in fact, people the world over have. Again, to a greater or lesser degree, but people increasingly want experiences that they perceive as authentic, that are authentic to them. And so that's the basic case of that book, is that authenticity has become the new consumer sensibility, the primary buying criterion by which people choose who to buy from and what to buy. And again, the world over, they don't want to buy the fake from the phony. They want the real from the genuine, even though they have different ideas of what that is.
And that's all, I think, a matter of perspective. As you said, that, the experience is an internal one. As a Disney fan, I find it completely authentically Disney.
Yeah.
As a Starbucks
Absolutely.
fan, I think it completely authentically Starbucks. But many of my Dutch friends are not so enamored.
Right.
There you go. So it's I love it. So I'm curious, Joe, going down a little rabbit hole that I've never gone with you before, is there's a huge rage in the world about purpose and purpose-based strategy.
Yep.
And that has to touch with authenticity. How are you, I'm sure you have connected these things, but what is your framework or mental model for purpose-driven strategies?
Yeah, so a number of things is one, we talk about 5 genres of authenticity in the book. I won't go through the details, but natural, original, exceptional, referential, and influential. And influential authenticity does in fact relate to purpose, that consumers will view something as authentic if it influences them, if it calls them to a higher level of being and so forth. And that only happens when there is a purpose there. We also then talk about 10 elements of authenticity. 5, there's 2 key standards: being true to self and being what you say you are. And then each of them have 5 elements that answer the questions who, what, where, and when, why, and how. And one of those on the business, on the what you who you are at your core is your purpose, right? What is your purpose? Why do you exist in business beyond making a buck? And so it is one of those things that if you want to truly be perceived as real, right, as real in both those key standards, then you need to have a meaningful purpose that you understand and that you obviously therefore stay true to, right? That's the key, is you got to stay true to that purpose. Then there's a connection to all the experience accounting work. We talk in the book, and again, I'm using shorthand that doing this stuff quickly, so people have to go look for the details that they want. But we talk about how when you stage experiences, work is theater, and therefore workers are actors. And one of the key things to understand then is your intention of acting, your intention, which is not what you do, but how you go about doing it, right? You're doing this task in order to your intention. And we also then talk about the overarching theme of the experience, that every great experience needs to have a theme. It's the organizing principle of the experience. It doesn't have to be fantasy like Disney World. It doesn't have to be in your face like a themed restaurant. It simply has to underline and allow everything to align together, which is a key thing with intention and purpose. So it's got to align together. Well, so I recognized early on that theme and acting intention are different levels of the same thing, right? It's your intention. And it's your intention for the entire experience, or it's your intention for this moment in this experience about what I'm doing. Well, then eventually I recognized that purpose is just taking that up another level. I worked with a number of companies, particularly hospitals, but others, in really defining what their theme is, and through this company called Storizon, helping them create a great new experience. And often, particularly with hospitals, again, it was the entire organization. The theme fit the entire organization, the customer experience, the employee experience, everything. And once you get to that level, you recognize, well, this is no longer just a theme. This is a purpose. It's a meaningful purpose for the organization. I've worked with other companies, including technology companies, in coming up with that theme. So there's this, think of it as concentric circles that work your way out from the acting intention to the theme of the experience. You think about your strategic intention in a Hamill and Prahalad sense, and then your meaningful purpose. And then one more connection in this universe of thought is I'm working with a colleague, Kim Korn, who helped me write my book, Infinite Possibility, on developing his ideas on how companies can thrive forever. Why do companies always have to fall into mediocrity and eventually fail? Why can't they thrive forever? And so he's developed a really great construct on what that is, including 7 imperatives. Right, you got to do these 7 things really well, including innovating greater at a greater level than your ecosystem. Otherwise, eventually the ecosystem is going to swamp you. You've got to unleash the capabilities of your people, and so forth. Well, one of those 7, and one of them, probably the core one, is you got to have a meaningful purpose again. If you don't have a meaningful purpose, then you fall into the command and control sort of ways of operating that is the death of thriving. That forces you to do optimization instead of vitalization, instead of regenerate. So to regenerate, you need to regenerate around a purpose.
I love the vitalization versus optimization. Like many things you say, I'm going to steal that. Hope you don't mind.
No, not at all. Kim might mind, but I don't care.
Okay, well, thank you, Kim. Ryanair is a fun example to kick around because I like using them as an example that a good experience or like a well-designed experience doesn't necessarily have to be a good service. And because I think more recently they've said, oh, wait, we should take care of our customers. So I think they've changed their tune a bit, but, they didn't have a greater purpose other than to just provide dirt cheap travel and do it in a way that had no frills. And they were just very bold and if you ask me, very pure and authentic about it. Wasn't for me, but I found it very charming.
Right. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. Right. There's nothing wrong with it. If that's who you are, that's what you want to be. That's absolutely fine. And obviously every customer that took a trip on them, I've never done it myself. I've done like Easy Air is the closest I've come. But every person that took that trip, made that calculation that the cheapness of this flight is worth the crap I'm going to have to put up with. Yeah. Right. And I'm going on vacation. I'm going to a football game and I'm going to drink with my buddies. And therefore, by the time I get done, guess what? I'm not going to remember that flight, much less care about it.
Yeah. So it's and related to Ryanair, you mentioned the customer experience and the employee experience, and you've been publishing recently about the employee experience, and it really resonates that this sort of purpose-driven, authentic sense of togetherness needs to be able to be driven through the employees in order to actually deliver that to the customers. I think it's the basic gist of it all. Is there a different
digital experience, like a streaming, service, video games, et cetera? Yeah.
Yeah. Is there for the listeners out there, based on the hospital work you did, is there different ways of crafting or staging those experiences for the employees and the customers, or is that one and the same, or how would they put those things together?
Well, with the work with the hospitals, we almost always did the same theme, the same purpose, organizing principle for both customers and employees, which allowed the employees to one, receive it basically from management, right? That we management are responsible for providing this great experience for you, and it's aligned with what we want you to do with your employees. So you're modeling that behavior, you're seeing the effects of it, and it makes it much easier to do it. And obviously easy to remember and to bring it all together. It's certainly possible to have two different organizing principles for the employee experience versus the experience you create for your customers, but it does work well when you do that. And obviously you have to think ahead of time what that is and know that this has got to cover both and not just be so customer oriented that it only fits with them.
Yeah, well, and I guess if we're going for authenticity, if you state a certain purpose, objective, values for the customers, and then if you treat your employees completely the opposite,
right,
it's not going to work. At least not for long. So,
companies actually corrode. In authenticity terms, companies corrode from the inside out. Right, it's when their management does not do what they say they want you to do, does not think in the same way they say they want you to think in treating customers and themselves, right? Then that's when they start to corrode and the employees no longer care about what they do for customers. And then you're basically in a degenerating business. And
you're done. So, Joe, as people can experience you here, you are literally world famous, multiple, books under your belt and have presented all over the world and yet are very approachable, which I very, very much appreciate. Who's your customer? Because you're very busy working with some of the, larger organizations in the world, as well as I think not so large organizations. But how would you describe the organization, which is perfect for strategic horizons to really get value from?
Well, I think my bio says something to the effect of that I work with Fortune 500 companies and entrepreneurial startups alike, to which you could add actually individual people particularly with our Experience Accounting Expert Certification course. We just did 2 virtual ones for the first time in the last 6 weeks. And we have almost 300 certified Experience Accounting experts in the world, a number in the Netherlands. And a number of those are individual people that basically paid out of their own pocket this huge fee to go through this course. And it's the highest praise I think I get, far more than if some, Fortune 500 company has paid me hundreds of thousands of dollars to work with them over years, that somebody paid this much money out of their pocket because they wanted that time with me and they wanted that learning and then wanted to apply it. And so it's basically the best clients for me are those that want to apply, right? Where it's not just a one and done speech and I'm there to hopefully get them to think differently, but I don't know much of what happens. But it's ones where we can, roll up our sleeves, we can get into workshop mode, we can think about how do these frameworks really make a difference? What are the things you really ought to be doing differently? And how can I help as you go along to review your plans and your strategies and so forth. Now, one of the things we don't do as a small 3-person company is projects, right? We don't do projects. That's why I partner with Stone Mantle, with Verizon, with others. Often some of the biggest consulting companies out there bring me in where they're doing the projects and they slot me into what I can do, which is fine as well. But it's people that really recognize that value in creating that great, authentic experience for their customers.
And I guess that person has to be somewhat, the word I want to use is somewhat enlightened or open to it, or else they wouldn't be coming to it. Because I'm not
exactly.
I'm not sure if people can be converted to this kind of thinking. I don't know. Do you have converts?
No, absolutely they can. I mean, so on the back of my business cards, I hardly ever give them out anymore, but on the back of my business cards, it's got this little tagline that says helping executives see the world differently. So that seeing the world, absolutely, you can convert them to see the world differently. Again, that's what the frameworks do, where you see it and then you can't unsee it. But it doesn't mean it always rises to the level of really making a difference in their company, or that they talk about it but don't really do it, or they work in things around the edges without understanding how it can really make a core difference in what they do and what business they're really in and the economic value that they create. But generally, if a company of any size is contacting me, there's at least one person there that gets it, right, and understands it. And they want me to come in to be able to make the case for the rest of the team so that they get it, and therefore they can begin being that difference in the company.
What would be some clues that, if an executive or senior manager or anyone's walking around their company and they smell something bad and they think that maybe Joe Pine and Strategic Horizons could be a cure for that? What are some clues that things are a bit wonky? Dissatisfied customers, dissatisfied employees? Is it just something, an itch that we're being commoditized?
Right. Well, that's the word I often use, is that when you recognize you're being commoditized, which is that you no longer really have a differentiation. So you're smelling the same as everybody else would be the way to put that in smell terms there, Chris.
Okay.
If you feel like you're smelling pretty much the same as everybody else, when you recognize that there's a disconnect between how the top people, whatever level you're at, but how the top people view the business and how the people down in the trenches view the business. There's often that data about how CEOs will think their NPS score is like 80%, and then it's really down at 10 or 20, or not 80%, but 80, and then down at 10 or 20. As where it really is, and the people at the bottom, they know that, right? Because they're working with them, and there is that disconnect. The emperor has no clothes. There's not listening to what's going on. It is crucial for executives at almost any level to be in the shoes of both their customers at various points in the year, as well as their employees, and understand what's going on and seeing it from that perspective. You remind me of when I got my master's at MIT years ago. That's what got me into this business. I did my thesis on mass customization and turned it into a book. And one of the people that I was with, who's actually now a good friend of mine still to this day, was an executive with GM, General Motors. right? And he volunteered. We had like 4 people that were on the suburbs, and everybody else was like in close to Cambridge, Massachusetts. And he volunteered. I'll drive every day. I got a company car, right? So okay, you like to drive company car. I could read while he's driving. I could get homework done, and he's driving, so it's fine with me. And at one point, sort of asked him, like, I think he was due for a new one. Like, well, how does this work? And he says, it's like I get this form in the mail, and it has the list of all these cars. I check off the car I want and what option is, and then I drop the form off, and then my keys with the secretary. And then, at the beginning of the day, when I come back of the day, there's new keys that they give me, and I go out and they tell me where the car's parked, and I go out and got a new car. And I said, that's what's wrong with General Motors. You never get to experience what your customers actually have to go through on your crappy distribution to buy a car, right? You need to be out there and experience it.
Yeah, that's so telling. I really make it a purpose that whatever I'm doing, any type of consulting or advisory, for example, I'm working with a shoe brand here in the Netherlands, a fashion brand. And, the question is around technology and digital. And the first thing I said is, well, I need to go find out who's buying these shoes. So let me go talk to let me go out there and these small retailers, how do they reorder shoes, and who are actually the customers there? And, okay, there's a brand store. Okay, what's going on there? And let me see the digital experience, and just to go feel all that stuff to find out what is exactly that we're trying to fix. And that was enlightening. And I took a number of videos and brought it back, and it was enlightening for management as well.
Which shouldn't be though, but it is.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're an organization, unless you have somehow been reminded by you or someone like you, then maybe they just get busy with the operation too much. Or, and I'm curious what your reaction to this is, or they've hired a customer experience head. That person is responsible to deal with the customer experience, and so I don't have to worry about it.
Right.
So
that's a very interesting point. It certainly could be. I mean, I'm proponent of the chief experience officer because many companies need that focus, but it's like everything else. Just because a CEO is a chief financial officer doesn't mean he doesn't need to know the numbers and how the business model works. Just because it has a chief operating officer doesn't mean you know how operations go, and so on and so forth. Right? He needs to understand that entire part of the business. And a CXO that doesn't make sure that happens, right, isn't doing his or her job either.
Yeah, that resonates with me. And I'm just curious, how do you, sorry to say it, you're essentially the godfather, you and Mr. Gilmore, of the experience economy, and then this whole wave of customer experience has erupted, on the coattails. How do you feel about that? What is the reaction?
Well, in my lesser moments, I view it as the bastardization of the whole concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but I also recognize the value it creates. But here's the issue. When most people use the term customer experience, and you could go back and re-listen to this or re-watch it, you'll notice that you said customer experience a few times, and I always said experience of your customers or stating experiences for your customers. I never used the term. And it's because of the fact that when most people use the term, what they mean is let's make our interactions with our customers nice and easy and convenient. And the big word now in the last 3 or 4 years has come out is frictionless. Let's make our interactions with customers frictionless. We don't want friction in there. Well, guess what? Friction is where experience happens.
Right.
Where real, true, distinctive experience happens. Nice, easy, convenient are all service characteristics. They will never get you to rise to the level of an experience. And this is where I'm talking that as the basic thesis of the book, that experiences are a distinct economic offering. They're not just better services. They're not just quality services. They're not just nice, easy, convenient services. They are distinct. And nice is nice, but rarely does it rise to the level of memorability. Right. And a true distinctive experience needs to have that residue of the memory of somebody. Frictionless means they're not going to remember. There's no reason to remember it. If it's easy, often that means let's routinize things to make it easy for employees to give them that frictionless service. But experiences, in fact, are inherently personal. And we need to recognize the individuality of each person, create that experience inside of them, which routinization, standardization, gets so much in the way of. And convenience is the antithesis of what I'm talking about. Convenience is let's get in and out as quickly as possible. Let's spend as little time with the customers as possible. Again, frictionless. But in fact, experiences are about the time customers spend with you, and that they actually value that time. And the basic formulation I've come up with is that services, i.e., CX, is time well saved, right? Nice, easy, convenient, frictionless. Experiences are time well spent. People value the time they spend with you. Think about, economically, anything you charge admission for is an experience, right? Well, you don't want a frictionless movie, a frictionless concert. You don't want a nice, easy, and convenient play or a sporting event, right? It's friction that creates drama, and it's the time what experiences are is the design of time. You need to design the time in a way that rises up to a climax and comes back down again. Basic theater point again.
I love it. And this is actually written also in the article that I looked up from 1998, that kicked it off even before the book. And so
I don't remember that. Well, this was before the customer experience term.
It was definitely before the customer experience, and the experience of the customer is time well spent. I really appreciate it. You said earlier that you have some things percolating around the corner, coming down the pipe in your head. Is there? Can you give a glimpse of what patterns you're seeing in the world today that are meaningful for us?
Right. One is the stuff I talked about with my colleague Kim Corn, how companies can thrive forever, which he labels as regenerative managing. That how do you manage in a way that regenerates a new advantage of the company over and over and over again? And so he's been working diligently on that, and now we're writing on that. So that will be coming out. And then there's a number of other ideas I think are very important. And one is looking at the rise of smart products. That we increasingly have these smart products around the thermostats that automatically adjust to how you actually live when you're gone and when you're there. The doorbells that have cameras can actually warn you when somebody's out there, or now can, if you're not home, can, send you a picture of whoever it is that's out there, and so forth. And, there's all these smart products, but the opposite of that, of course, is dumb products, right? Products that have no intelligence in them. They can't sense and respond to you and your needs. And with the rise of smart products, that we clearly see those dumb products and how dumb they really are. If you've ever walked up to a door that you assume is automatic and doesn't open for it, you run into it, right? I've done that. Or you put your hands in front of the faucet in a public toilet and no water comes out. It's like, well, I was expecting this to be smart. And today's world, that's one of the things we're going to have to do, right? Where we don't want to touch things. Being smart is a way to get to touchless activity, and so that's going to be endemic. But there's some things that are so dumb they actually are stupid. And I think about, in today's world, where you drive in your car and you come up to a stoplight and you stop and no car goes across for 60 seconds, right, until it finally turns green again and you can go, right? Just wasted the Earth's resources just sitting there because it's not smart enough to know the actual traffic patterns and so forth. Many other examples like that, or you a more human example, right? You call up a contact center, and first of all, they're not smart enough to recognize your phone number, right? Even though it's in their records, and be able to say, welcome, Mr. Pine. Then ask you for your account number. So you dutifully, look up your account number. What is that? You put your account number in. And then you wait on hold, or you go through the various permutations of them trying to slow you down so you don't bother their contact center representatives. And maybe in fact, you'll just get tired and go away. Well, finally, you get to a real human being. And authenticity point, I can remember when we didn't have to preface human being with the word real, but you get to a real human being. And what's the first thing they ask you for? Your account number.
Account number, yeah. Who are you? You're like, wait,
right, what? Because I said, well, I already gave that in. Wait, what's going? That's stupid, right? Even though they got this intelligence to figure it out, the guys intelligence to ask for it, but then they don't even remember it, over the course of a single phone call, right? So that's just stupid. So to counteract the stupid, the dumb, and even go beyond the smart, one of the things that's happening is the rise of genius platforms, right? So from smart to genius. Genius platforms are like Alexa, Amazon's Alexa, like Google's Assistant, like other platforms that not just sense and respond, but anticipate what it is that you want and need, that can vastly multiply the jobs that they can do for you. With Alexa, for example, being able to, if not now, shortly, hundreds of millions of different things. Imagine that. One device, I can do hundreds of millions of different things, right? For it. That's genius. Now, and then Amazon actually just announced in the last week a little tiny drone, right? That whenever there's movement will fly around your home and take pictures of things and so forth, right? In case you're out of town, you see what you've got an intruder in that, but also you think about all the data that's going there. Well, what genius platforms do, and we can talk about where you want to limit how much data they actually get and so forth, I mean, obviously, but genius platforms do, they take all that data exhaust and use it to understand you better and better, right? To be able to again, anticipate your needs, do multiple things for you, and in effect, give you superpowers, right? Do you ever remember the first time you called an Uber, right? I pulled out my phone and I hit a button and I summoned a car to me, right? It's like, wow. Yeah. Right now you get used to that and so forth, but being able to do anything, right? Summon anything to you is a superpower that genius platforms can give us. So I think that's one of the key things.
I would suppose a continuation of that is the genius platform will start interpreting your intentions and desires and offering those things up if you give it certain permissions and things like that. So
right.
No,
and then eventually it will lock you into your bedroom and not allow you out because you're an unsafe person. And there is an end to this, and it's right. Told in many. I know some of your listeners are going there. So
many a movie, yeah. So the Genius platform is incredible. I am spending time with conversational AI systems and architectures. Part of the Open Voice Network, which has...
I've got a guy who's working on reading all of my books and articles and turning me into an AI avatar that you can converse with and along that subject. And all these things I've told you, right? Eventually, in 5 years from now, you could talk to my avatar. So, I'm busy that day, Chris. Could you interview my avatar? Right?
wait a second. How do I know you're actually you?
You'll never know.
So, Joe, on that note, this has been delightful. I will find the link to the certification course, which is, I'm sure, on your website on strategichorizons.com. If you're looking for Joe, you can find him there at the website or also on LinkedIn. There's a couple. I'll also post the original Harvard Business Review article, which certainly had a meaningful impact on my personal and professional life. And I really thank you for sharing that knowledge. As well as some links to some of the books, as well as the recent article published by RightPoint about the employee experience. So there's quite a few things out there. And Joe, thank you so much. And I hope, for the listeners that this is really just a scratch to the surface. And there's many depths more on each of these things in the book. So please, follow those links and go pick that stuff because it's delightful reading and challenging. It'll challenge your worldview. I think, as you said, you can't unsee it. Right. So I guess proceed with caution, people. So Joe, thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Chris, for the opportunity. Thanks for your friendship and thanks for your promotion.
Learn more at ebillion.com/podcast.